So welcome again. I am very pleased to invite our panel to each introduce themselves. I think they'll do a better job than I will. Just quickly, I'm the CEO again of American Composers Forum. Jasmine, would you like to go first?
All right. I'll be the sacrificial lamb. Hello, everyone. I have two roles, actually. My main day job is I am on the music faculty for the Grand Street Campus High Schools in Brooklyn, New York. It's actually 3 high schools rolled into one. We'll get into that a little later. And I also serve as the artistic director of the Metropolitan Music Community, which is a New York arts nonprofit that sponsors 3 community bands, the Brooklyn Wind Symphony, Grand Street Community Band, and the Kings County Concert Band. Really excited to be here, and I'm really excited for this idea exchange. And I'm always into dialogue about how we can be better artists and improve the landscape for everyone.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. Jennifer.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Jen Jolly. I guess we all have many hats. I'm an assistant professor of composition at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. I also am a composer and a creative opera producer, and I'm really thrilled to talk about wind ensemble music, which I tend to write a lot of. So thanks for having me here today.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jonathan.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Viella. As of I think last week or maybe the week before it, I'm happy to say I'm now Dr. Jonathan Viella. I'm finishing up my time studying wind conducting at the University of Texas. And before I conclude, I do want to say that over the last few years, or really over the last decade, I've been in various panel discussions and lectures of my fellow panelists, and so it goes without saying that it's an honor to be here amongst them. And my thanks to the American Composers Forum for today.
Thanks, Jonathan. Congratulations. Weston.
Hey everybody, and Vanessa, thanks for having me. I'm Weston Sprott. I'm Dean of the Preparatory Division at the Juilliard School. And in that context, I lead 2 programs, Juilliard's Pre-College and the Music Advancement Program. And I'm also a trombonist in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra for the last 16 years. I grew up in Texas. I know I have some other Texans on this on the panel with me. I'm actually in Texas right now, in Dallas at the moment. But I grew up in Texas, which of course is very, very rich in the band tradition. So this is music that I've loved for a very, very long time. It's the music that got me started as a musician, and looking forward to exchanging thoughts with everybody.
Thanks so much. So American Composers Forum, just briefly, we're based in Minnesota. I'm actually talking to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is also the ancestral lands of the Ojibwe and Dakota nations. And we support and advocate for living music creators. We do this through direct funding, through our Innova recording label. I Care If You Listen is now our multimedia platform, and then community conversations like this. We also have a program called Band Quest, which has been going for more than 20 years, where we commission a composer or artist to work with a middle school band or musical ensemble over the course of several weeks, sometimes months, and the pieces are then published through Hal Leonard. We haven't publicly announced this, but we're very excited that our next cycle will actually be with the Music Advancement Program at Juilliard with Weston's team, and looking forward to publicly sharing that very soon. But Valerie Coleman will be the composer for that program. So that's what we're coming into this conversation. We also had planned this panel initially for the Midwest Clinic, which happens every year for thousands in Chicago. And while obviously we couldn't gather last December, we've also just learned that we will be invited to do it this December. So look forward to continuing there as well. For any of you that will be there, we'll see you in person, hopefully. Naturally, we're talking about band music, but this conversation, I think, will probably apply to many different musical perspectives. And while we're talking mostly about concert band and community band based on the backgrounds of the people here today, we also recognize, as Weston was referring to in his introduction, that bands are a primary entry point to music for so many, yet not well represented in the mainstream. We don't hear much about bands in some of the traditional media. There's this huge, vast world of bands, but we don't hear, if you're not in that world, you're not often aware of what's possible or what is happening. And it is an incredible place for composers to find a lot of inspiration. So within the band world, there are many segments of participation. Our hope is to demonstrate both how powerful this community can be for today's music, as well as the impact of working with living composers and artists with your band. We hope you leave today with some ideas of how to commission and collaborate with a composer, make a case if you need to for your teacher, administrator, or colleague as to why it matters to play today's music and why it matters who creates it. So Jasmine, I'm going to go to you first. I'd love to ask you to share how you've approached partnerships with composers in your community and how that's impacted your students and community ensembles.
Oh, I'm really excited to share because this is kind of the fun part of the job, or the jobs in this case. So I'm going to share my screen for just a moment. Let me just get all situated. Okay. All right, is everything coming through pretty clearly? Great. Okay, so a lot of my work with MMC and with my job as a DOE educator has a lot of beautiful overlap. And the composer is a big part of that because the composers are part of our music community. So the lens that I'm going to kind of walk you through is some of our early residencies with composers and what that effect had on the community ensembles and with our students at the Grand Street campus specifically. And I hope that you can pick and choose methods or ideas to take to your communities or in your own specific situations. So our first interaction was actually, we got really lucky, was with David Maslenka, and he would manage to do residencies with Brooklyn Wind Symphony Grand Street Community Band, and his son Matthew did a residency with Kings County Concert Band. And a lot of this conversation did kind of come out of the fact that, you know, David lived in New York City for many years, and he always noticed that there was a lack of representation of New York City students in the New York All-State Band. So Jeff Ball, the conductor of Brooklyn Wind Symphony, you know, after programming his music for a number of years, started this dialogue that led to a commissioning project from which we got Requiem. The biggest part of that commission was, yes, adding a new piece to the repertoire, but we built into the commission agreement that residencies also needed to happen at the Grand Street Campus High School. So David Maslenka came in 2 separate times over the course of 2 days each to work with all of our bands and with our AP Music Theory class. So that was a really powerful moment to have one of the world's most recognized composers for our genre come speak to our kids, not only about performance practice of the music, but also coaching them through the process of creation. And it was probably one of the more powerful moments for all of us involved, and kind of really inspired our kids to keep music into their lives. So that was really great. And then as we move forward, Michael Murkowski is another composer who is very well known in the band world. And Michael, again, since moving to New York, has done residencies with all of our ensembles at the Metropolitan Music Community. And he was also there to help prep our performances for Midwest and for WASB, because we were performing one of his pieces. And we even did a major recording project with the Brooklyn Wind Symphony, where we recorded several of his works available on iTunes and Spotify. And what was really amazing about that recording process was our community bands are all volunteers. So even the Brooklyn Wind Symphony, which has traveled around the country, it's all volunteers who pay their own way. So to make a full-length studio album was a really amazing artistic experience for our community. David Gould, who is the principal clarinetist for the New York City Ballet, was our featured clarinet soloist. Brian Warsdale, who helped lead the commission for City Trees, was also one of the conductors featured on the album. And even our producer, Brian Loesch, who is a Grammy-nominated producer, has now found a home within the Metropolitan community and has kind of become our resident producer. And just as a fun fact, you know, that community bond has grown so much with MMC and Michael that Michael was one of the percussionists in the Kings County Concert Band for a year. So this is a really cool example of when you invite composers in, they also have room to perfect their craft. You know, part of the reasoning of him doing that was to get a real good handle on how this medium works and to make those personal connections. He always thought that that was really important. And because of that connection with our community bands, he's been to Grand Street Campus High School numerous times and has even done a residency with the New York City All-City Concert Band program, which is an honors concert band that meets weekly. and then they perform a major concert in the spring. So fast forward a little bit further, and Huang, love his writing. He's another powerhouse. And our paths crossed because when Brooklyn Wind Symphony was accepted to the Midwest Clinic, we were the first New York City-based group to ever be invited to Midwest. So Moth came out of, basically we're like, okay, Trust Fall, we're gonna commission Viet to do this, and he's gonna write our closer for this performance. And it was really an amazing experience for our musicians to be involved with the creative process in real time. Fast forward a couple of years, renewal. I apologize for the spelling on the slide. I'll clean that up next time. But it was really exhilarating to have Sandbox Percussion, who is in Brooklyn, come and perform with the Brooklyn Wind Symphony for, you know, the fact that the piece was written for them. And it was really great to have Viet just kind of workshopping and going through the process and seeing how this is going to work for a larger wind band, because it was originally a chamber piece. So that was a really awesome and pivotal moment, because our students seeing Viet in person at these concerts was really important. They're like, oh, composers can look like anyone. So that was a really interesting pivoting point of, yeah, we want to normalize this behavior across all demographics. So Weston will have fun with this. We've done a lot of residencies with Anthony Barfield. Anthony Barfield is a graduate from the Juilliard School and has this beautiful way of taking pop music and classical music and kind of moving seamlessly between both worlds. So he's done residencies with all three of our community bands. And there's a little underground brass recital called Don Winston and Friends, which was started by one of our euphonium players in the band. And it's just an assembly of all the brass ninjas that are available and that come through and do a recital. And this person, you know, did not play for very many years. And because they found a community band to be a part of, they took it upon themselves to get music just as a community fixture. And we've had some really great partnerships. So John Whitaker, who is the trombone professor at University of Alabama, has done residencies with Grand Street. Demondre has done residencies with Brooklyn. And then for Anthony Barfield's North Star, Christopher Coletti and Joseph Alessi were the featured brass players for that performance. And our students at Grand Street campus were at all these performances, and things kind of culminated with Demondre putting together kind of a brass masterclass day for the students at Grand Street campus as an end result. So I really want to just paint that picture of whatever wonderful, awesome things the community band gets, it's beautiful, but I love the fact that we always try to find a way to get the students involved and into the conversation as well. Fast forward even a couple of more years, and Akash Matal is another composer who we're lucky in New York that we have a lot of great people who live close by. And his first introduction was his piece Samay Raga was part of the residency with Brooklyn Wind Symphony. They were also on that consortium. And this was in preparation for their performance at Carnegie Hall with a real focus on New York-based composers. And what was really great about that residency is it immediately turned into a conversation about how can I add to the canon for young music? So Akash and Jeff got together, and the idea of writing a nice level 2-3 piece called 3 Songs of Bengal came about. And what was really great about that commission was, instead of having just a set of bands, it was really kind of a crowdsourcing of a lot of New York City band directors and a lot of international and national band directors. And this brought the price down for buy-in to $75. So for a lot of programs, this was the first time that they could be part of a consortium because of that price point. So I think that that's a really pivotal moment to get all schools involved with that creative process. You don't necessarily have to put away thousands of dollars to be involved with the act of creation. We can speak more to that, or I could put you in touch with Akash himself to kind of work get the inner workings of how that would actually go down. But what I really enjoyed about this partnership was there was always a working group of New York City band directors that Akash kept in touch with as the piece was growing to kind of confirm, okay, is this gonna work? How is this as far as scoring? And what even came out of that was inclusion of guitar, bass guitars, and the actual tabla parts that you would find in the music that is represented in this particular piece. So we thought it was a real pivotal moment because there's not a lot of South Asian wind band pieces, period. This was the first to my knowledge. So we really enjoyed being part of a conversation where more genres are being represented through the wind band by interacting with composers who have the impetus to do so. Fast forward a bit more, and Joanne Harris is just an amazing person who I love her style. She's mostly into film scoring, but our introduction came to, she was working on her first wind band piece, The Lighthouse. And I just so happened to be at the rehearsal with Grand Street Community Band where they were kind of workshopping it. Again, we're blessed that we have free community bands. So one thing that we always try to do is if there's local composers that want to test a piece or workshop or kind of see how things go, we've had people come across and kind of do that. And it's really nice to kind of give somebody that space to test things out, especially in New York. Space literally is at a premium, let alone having a wind band with all the pieces and all the parts covered. So if we could offer that to help someone amplify their voice, we're happy to do it. And she also did a residency with the Kings County Concert Band in preparation for their 10th anniversary concert. And the theme there was music written in the last 10 years. So a real focus on contemporary music. And Kings County is specifically designed to accommodate level 1 through 5 music. So this was also, okay, here's all the new stuff and modern stuff that's coming out for younger or developing ensembles specifically. So that was really, really important for us to have her along on that journey. And now the Lighthouse is making tracks all over the nation. And it's really good to see something that we helped amplify getting legs. Probably my favorite success story as far as composer connections is Kalijah Dunton. And he is actually a former student from the Grand Street campus. And he was actually at all the residencies. Like, so if it had Grand Street Campus High School, Kalijah was there and has since gone on to join the community ensembles. And his most recent piece, Still Water, was premiered by the Brooklyn Wind Symphony. And it's actually going to be recorded virtually by our MMC Virtual Ensemble. It'll be our last virtual ensemble performance before we actually go live. And one thing that was really amazing about Kalijah is the talent was always apparent. He just needed room and venue to do that. And Michael Murkowski actually took time out of his day and kind of formed an unofficial mentoring situation with Kalijah to kind of guide him on, get your work out there. And since then, Kalijah is published by Murphy Music Press, and his piece Still Water is being performed by bands nationally, including a couple of military bands, and having a couple of international performances. So to give literally somebody who came up through our high school program such a voice to where their voice is traveling all around the world feels really good. And we want to keep doing that as an organization because, if we have, we give, How do we get all of this? Well, step one is really kind of obvious, but program works by living composer. You have to make that effort of, band directors have this thing of, we're going to just do what we did in high school. And by God, that's the literature. And I really am loving that I live in a time where, well, no, what's the next Giannini? What's the next H. Owen Reed? Who are the next established composers? And we get to make that decision by making programming decisions that support what we think is important, what we think is valuable as band directors. So if you have a community ensemble or you are running any kind of program, you have more power in what that conversation and what that literature is going to look like. Step two, sounds really silly, reach out to them. I think composers today are way more savvy with their website design and really understand that you don't just exist on this side, the band's on that side, and never in between shall meet. I love that composers are really making part of their working model that ask me questions. Here's, it's really nice as a director to have that level of accessibility with folks like Jen Jolly. Like we just had a little exchange because we are programming ASH and it was just like a cool connection. And Jen, you're going to be on the hook later. Haha, wink, wink, nod, nod. I may have to have you do a drive-by or some point.
I'm okay with that.
And yeah, there is a fundraising component, and I can speak more to this maybe in the Q&A section, but fundraising doesn't always mean one person bringing a $10,000 check. fundraising in the time of social media and Squarespace can look a lot different and can be a lot more accessible if you have many people contributing to one singular vision. How do these commissions get going? Okay, step one, program the works of people you would want to commission. Reach out to them. For us, what we like to do is to build a residency into any commission agreement we enter, or you could follow these fundraising steps and just crowdfunded could be things like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Crowdsource could be like what Akash did and just have very many people. Don't limit how many people can join the consortium. It's just, here's the flat rate, come on in. And there's the standard model of consortium. Okay, we have these many slots to cover all the cost, first come, first serve. These are all valid, combinations can work, but choose the path that works for you in your situation would be the advice I would give. Why bother doing any of this? I firmly believe that the more creative voices you have, the more creative art comes out as a result. And I truly believe we are in a wind band renaissance that we haven't seen since the 50s and 60s, as far as the amount of people writing, the variety of styles that we're borrowing from. Second to that, and I have no qualms about, it's got to be quality art first. Second to that, I do believe that representation matters. I do believe that when you see a wide variety of people engaged in a behavior, it normalizes the behavior. So every one of these composers that I've just mentioned, because so many New Yorkers have been exposed to them in our community bands, and our students have experienced them in honor ensembles or in high school band, there's now a pretty aggressive push that we're going to take works from each of these composers and recommend that their works be added to the NYSSMA state list. Whether or not that goes through, we're still in the process of finding out, but I think it's time that NYSSMA has this beautiful diversity statement on their website. Well, this is a great opportunity to back that statement up with actual accountable actions. And if you can build your community, it doesn't matter what state you're in. If you're unhappy with the representation on your state list, use those connections to make change. And then most importantly, it's all about taking things off of the page. Art never exists in a vacuum. It's always contextual. So this beautiful triangle of conductor, composer, and musician, we're in a time where all three pieces, whether virtually or in person, can kind of connect. And I think that makes the art more real, more accessible, and it makes it more of an experience as opposed to a spectacle. And that's how art lives and makes it to the next generation. So please throw any questions into the chat, or we'll share contact information at the end to dig in as to more of the how and the nuts and bolts. But that's kind of my experience with how to engage with composers and kind of the philosophy behind it.
Jasmine, thank you so much. I mean, what a rich presentation. I'm so glad we're recording this because I want more people to see this, and maybe we can even see your slides again too. So thank you so much. I love how you talked about relationships, and you illustrated several examples where it wasn't just a one-off, and there was maybe this one collaboration that led to this other collaboration, and how you're thinking about all the people that should be involved in that collaboration. Yeah, I know we're going to have a lot of questions for you at the end. I'm going to just pivot now to Jonathan. Speaking of those relationships and how you reach out to composers, would love for you to share a bit more about how you've approached this, and also what are some questions people should be asking as they approach a composer or artist about a collaboration. Thank you.
Right. Well, I mean, it really is about relationships as creating. As I've approached this, it's so important to take it through the lens of that this relationship should be spawned out of mutual respect, spawned from a place of authenticity and sincerity, rather than a place of opportunity or perhaps prestige, because there is a certain amount of attention and prestige always involved in a commissioning process. So I'll speak about the few experiences that I've had within the creative process working with a composer. The first was Donald Grantham, which was an amazing opportunity that kind of fell into my lap during my time with working with Cedar Park Winds. We were preparing for the Midwest Clinic, and I must say a powerful lesson from this. A big takeaway is that composers are people too. And I have to say, a younger version of myself would hold composers in a different light. You know, I didn't see them as people. I saw them as composers. You know, they don't really need to breathe oxygen. They definitely can walk on water. But it was through this process of you know, the opportunity to work and speak with Donald Grantham and birth this piece, Effulgent Light, taught me that you know, composers have their own feelings, they have their own habits, and they buy groceries too. And they're very, I will say, Jasmine mentioned this prior, composers, I think, are actually quite accessible. Maybe as a modern trend, or maybe they have always been. I find them also quite receptive, at least to your ideas, very open to discussion, and very open to inquiries as well. So my big takeaway from that was simply knowing that composers, any composers, I actually think are quite accessible. If I may speak about a more recent and I will say more intimate project, was the premiere of 39 Inside by composer Jose Martinez. And Laura, if you could share that concert program. And then to the audience, I invite you not only to look through the link, or you're more than welcome to download it as well. So this project began in around 2016, would eventually be completed in 2019. And I have to say, it was a project that was spawned by my own state of being overwhelmed by if I can be frank and completely honest with each of you, the bigoted and xenophobic trends within society. And going through those years, I as someone who is specializing in art, specializing in wind conducting, I felt hopeless and honestly kind of useless, as I would watch the news and see people like me that are being caged in the southern part of my country. And so this project was initially my aim at creating a response to this internal but very much external issue that I was grappling with. And so in response to this, I scoured composer websites, and didn't know, you know, most of the names that I saw, but acquainted myself with them, acquainted myself with bios, listened to samples, listened to their other works. And it was through this kind of scouring process that I ultimately would meet Jose Martinez, and we connected. After initial meetings, after kind of like a meet and greet, and just kind of learning more about one another, together we kind of curated and would eventually premiere his work entitled 39 Inside, which conveyed immigration into the eyes, or immigration into the United States, but through the eyes of the immigrant. And so we wanted this project to convey to the audience this feeling of fear, but also this feeling of hope. At the end, I will say that the project engendered many lessons, as Jasmine kind of touched upon, the potential for these projects to really create powerful lessons, not only for the audience we would discover, but also for us, the performers, the musicians, all of the people that were involved in the theater and dance elements of the project. Just powerful lessons. I think the most prominent lesson from that one was, you know, as someone who is born in the United States, it's not an innate feeling for us to understand the will to risk your own safety, the safety of your family, to just be and exist in a different country. And in a way, I think that performance and that project allowed us to do that. So in speaking about the creative process through these, I believe, because I know there are countless lessons in addition to the one that I experience that exist within the commissioning and creative process, particularly lessons that remove either you as the teacher or you as the conductor, or your ensemble away from their own viewpoint or their own paradigm. And I think that's incredibly rich and incredibly valuable. So to answer the question, questions that I asked, that I encourage you to ask as well is, first a question to yourself: why? What is your motivation for doing this? What are you interested in? Why, explain your will for embracing a project like this. And then the second is a question to ask outside: whose compositional voice or whose character resonates with your own, or do you think could really benefit your students or your ensemble? And then to cite the initial example learned from Donald Grantham, is just reach out to them. Find their number or find their email and introduce yourself and explain your project, explain your will and your why, and move forward from there.
Jonathan, thank you so much. And thanks for your vulnerability and sharing your personal experience with us. And it's so powerful. And I can't think of a better illustration of why music of today matters, and the context in which you brought in that composer relationship has, just looking at those program notes and what you shared, I encourage you all to check it out. It's very moving, and your own personal story that you also included in that. I so appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
Of course. And then if I may, I really do encourage each of you to check out Jose Martinez, his website. You can find him on a Google search, but just an amazing person and an amazing composer as well.
Thank you. Well, we have another composer with us today, who can speak to the receiving end of these conversations and what has been some meaningful collaborations for you, Jen, and also, obviously having to be quite innovative these days. What are some of the things that you will bring with you moving forward as we come out of COVID, and what those collaborations might look like? And anything else you want to respond to what's been shared already. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me again. Just to kind of echo with both what Jasmine and Jonathan said, we are normal people, although I think I was reminded why I love writing band music. If you all think that I'm pretty dang special, I like that attention. However, let me remind every single one of you, I am a living and breathing human. I'm trying to stay hydrated. I need my food, and we actually need to work with people. What gives me the most joy in life is that I especially get to create music with other people together, which is why COVID has been a time. That being said, I think one of the silver linings that has happened during COVID is actually even more composer accessibility. So even though we're probably all Zoom fatigued right now, I am sitting in a virtual room, different than the one you are in now, because I'm a music person. And what I've noticed is during this time, I've actually been able to reach out to different educational ensembles during this time of COVID. Especially, there's some ensembles I'm thinking about my colleagues in California where they're not quite ready to be in person yet. But this was a wonderful opportunity in which to have composers drop in their classrooms. I think it's accessible in one way. The other way is that they don't have to fly me out to California, although that does make me a little sad. But at the same time, there are different types of ensembles. I used to work at Ohio Wesleyan University's small liberal arts college that may not fill out the ranks and may not have the budget to bring in or work with a composer. And so I've just been so fortunate that even as recently as yesterday, I was talking with some students at Cal State Long Beach, and I was able to hop on. And I did have to say that, I have to eat dinner soon because, again, I'm a person and the time change. But I just think that is something going forward that just really is monumental in the process. Let's say maybe your ensemble has, funding and got a grant or put it in the contract, which is really smart. And we like that, to come out and visit the ensemble. How about the times in between? I don't write a piece in one day. That would be quite amazing and insane. But, just to have me along in the process. I was thinking about a recent thing I did with the composers in schools organization. Me and some of my Creative Repertoire Initiative colleagues decided to write a flexible suite, which stay tuned for that. We all wrote 1-ish minute pieces to be put together in a suite or not. And I was meeting with Rio Americano High School in Northern California. And I thought, hey, I know about Northern Californian electronic music history. Y'all have these bookless synthesizers. And I thought it would be really fun to like create an electronic track, that they have some ownership in, like, so I kind of made the musicians, these young high school musicians, like write their ostinato. They didn't know that. They were a little bit like timid at first. You know what, for fun, I'm actually going to share the screen because I have it up. And I know this looks like a lot of cables and wires. At the same time, I told them about this red panel and specifically a 16-note sequencer. I'm like, hey, we're gonna pick 16 notes. Go. And at first I was like, oh, it could be like F, 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 F. And I said, but that would sound weird. But then they started being really collaborative. They either unmuted themselves on Zoom or they put in the chat what note would be really cool. So for example, they really wanted this F as the 16th note here. I don't know if you can see this pop up. It's F3, and then they wanted it to go to F sharp, and then they got to pick the tempo, and they wanted it somewhat jazzy or crazy, because that's what their band room normally sounds like in a normal time. But I had a lot of fun working with them, creating a piece, and it like introduces them to music creation, which I know, like, again, all of you band directors are saints. Y'all trying to get them to tune the right chords and intonation and playing the right rhythms. But something about learning how to write music or even improvising just kind of gets pushed aside. So I was like, I'm going to make you all kind of experiment. I'm just going to be a dork and just play this sequence because this is what they came up with. Turns out that lick is a little bit more complicated to play though. So I did jokingly say to the directors, I was like, well, if students are like, this is hard, I can be like, well, you wrote it. But anyways, that's something that was easily done over Zoom. And even though we're zoomed out, we'll take a break from Zoom, but it just makes things a little bit more accessible. So I'm really looking forward to that future.
I just had to quote you because I was so
literally, yeah, they're gonna hate that, but
I love it. Thanks, Jen, and thanks for the sample. I enjoyed it. And wow, that's I'm jealous of the class you worked with. Weston, last but not least, I'd love to hear from you, from your perspective. You've been initiating quite a few different commissioning projects. One of which is the partnership with us, which we're really excited about. Would love to hear, how you're making the case for this and why you think it matters to invest in this work in the Music of Today, in the work with the students at your school.
Well, first, we're super excited about BandQuest. That's going to be really, really cool. It's going to be a huge highlight of this upcoming school year. Valerie Coleman's an amazing composer, and she's amazing at a lot of other things too. Amazing person, amazing player, amazing teacher, chamber musician, all these things. So I think our students are just going to be blown away by the opportunity to work with her. It's going to be really, really great. To your question about why investing in it matters, I think the word investing is really important because, investment can be investing in time, or it can be investing with finances. And it's oftentimes said that your budget is a moral document. And so taking some of the things that you financially invest in and deciding you want to transition some of those to creating new works, and creating new works by a really inclusive group of composers is really, really important. And I think it matters because it's going to shift the mindsets of our future leaders in music, especially if they start coming in contact with what this means at a really early age. So I'm thinking about these students who are going to be working with composers in this way from the time they're 13 or 14 years old, perhaps even younger in some cases, which is something that I never got a chance to do when I was a kid. And it also means that the future of our canon depends on it as well. We wake up 20, 30 years from now, what are going to be the standard pieces and who will have written them, and what will our students today, who are going to be the leaders tomorrow, what pieces they're going to be aware of. even when people ask me about band pieces, and I think back to my early development in band, I think about things like the whole suites or La Fiesta Mexicana and stuff like that, because those are the things, those were my first introductions to wind ensemble and band repertoire. And I think we have a chance for the students that we're developing now, that their first influences with this music will be different or more varied or more inclusive, however you want to put it. So my frame as an educational leader oftentimes is, I think about what worked for me, but also think about what did I miss? You know, and this is something, this whole avenue of commissioning and understanding composers and meeting with composers and having them create works that are uniquely suited to your ability or the place in development that you're in is something that I completely missed. And I think to myself, wow, it'd be really, really great if our students could have that experience. How much better would I be today if I had had that experience when I was 12? You know, goodness, I wish. But since I can't go back in time, perhaps we can fix it for them. So that's part of it. I think the commissioning work gives our students a broader understanding of what it means to be a musician, or all the different ways that you can quote unquote do music. I think oftentimes at least when I was in 6th grade and I picked up a trombone for the first time, I thought you do music by playing the trombone. And you could look across the band hall and I guess, well, someone is conducting the band and teaching us how to play these instruments. So that's basically the totality of how you do music. No one really talked about the composer. It was just a name on the top right-hand corner of the sheet, presumably by someone who died a very long time ago, and someone has deemed them to be a genius or something, and that's about the end of it. But we have the opportunity to frame this for our students. Like everyone has been saying, that a lot of these composers are living people who can come and stand in your band room and talk to you about what this piece is and what it means to them and why they created it and why you can see yourself in it. And it's a new way to think about doing music, because you can play, you can teach, you can listen, you can compose, you can commission, you can support the music, you can produce. There's any number of things you can do. And so I think it personalizes what composition is. You know, and we all want our students to have a broad understanding of music, and this is an important part of it. The other thing with being inclusive about your programming and being inclusive about who you hire, it's I think it's really important because everybody has a unique voice, and you get a chance to understand and learn in a very unique way about someone's personal life experience when you play their music. And that can be about their race or their gender or where they're from. You know, we talk about all the time that Copland sounds American, or that Shostakovich sounds Russian, or whatever. You know, in one of our prep calls, we were talking about hip hop, that you can hear West Coast hip hop and you can hear New York hip hop, or Atlanta, or I'm from Houston. There's a certain style of hip hop that comes from Houston. And so there's a lot of ways for students to see themselves in the music, and also to see into the lives of other people in the music. So I think that's a valuable frame. And I think that matters for everybody, because oftentimes the conversation about diversity and inclusion revolves around how we can help students from the traditionally or historically underrepresented communities. But I think it cuts both ways. So of course, I'm excited that, for example, when Valerie comes to work with Juilliard's Music Advancement Program next year, that some of our Black female students are going to be able to look up and say, hey, look, here's this amazing Black woman who's doing all these incredible things. That's awesome, right? But I also think it's going to be really cool for our Asian students or our white students or our Hispanic students to go, hey, look, there's this amazing Black woman doing all these incredible things. My life can be transformed, and I can experience joy and depth and purpose all through the work of a person who looks like this or a person who looks like that. So right now, in addition to what's happening with BandQuest, which is going to be great, in the pre-college and music advancement program combined, we are commissioning 34 different composers at the moment to write pieces for solo instrument and piano, and also etudes at the level of the students that exist in our program. So we're super excited about that. And the way that we worked on figuring out who we wanted to commission was partially due to help that I got from you, Vanessa, because you helped to give me some ideas about who some different people are that we should be looking into and considering, but then sharing list of composers with our faculty members and asking them to explore. And so it's not just like, hey, we want you to commission a Latinx person or a female composer. It's like, here's a list of all these different composers that are from a variety of different backgrounds. And we're not just going to tokenize and pick someone. I want you to listen to 10 or 15 different people or whoever you've heard of before that I haven't heard of either, and get together as a faculty group and select someone whose work you really, really like, a work that speaks to you. And then we can ask if that person is willing to write a piece for your studio, which I think then is a very different ask to the composer. Instead of saying, well, we're looking to commission works by more Black composers, it's we're looking to create a completely updated canon that's more inclusive and more thoughtful for our students. And our faculty members have taken the time to explore your work. They really admire what you do. They like your music a lot. And they would be honored if you would write something for their studio for the development of young aspiring musicians at this level. I think that's a very different ask. So that's the angle by which we've approached this work. And yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'll stop there for now and leave some time for other people to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Weston. I just really want to underscore everything that all of you said. You're incredible ambassadors. You're all hired to advocate for this work. Thank you so much. But especially what you said in your last comments, Weston, I think, as we said, composers are people too. And think about the context in which you're approaching them. Think about what you're asking them to do. Yes, you may be interested in them because of their ethnic backgrounds, because of the geographic location, and that's great, but recognize that they don't want to just be approached because of that. They are an artist, they are a whole person, they bring many, many different identities and influences into their music. And everybody, identifies differently too. So make no assumptions and approach generously and especially with that idea of the investment in the relationship, that's going to be really meaningful for the recipient as well. We have about 10 minutes left. So I want to just invite anybody in the panel if they wanted to contribute anything more, especially to the last comment. And as people think of questions, we welcome you to enter that into the chat box as well. And please also feel free to put your videos back on. We can talk in this Zoom circle, as it were. Well, there are no questions. So
I'm seeing
there's a question in the chat.
Sorry, I apologize. Jasmine, do you feel that the creation of new ensembles through BWS or MMC has guided the need for the commissioning of new works? Expound upon the creation of life mirroring art that has become synonymous with your organization's mission.
Oh, clutch the pearls. Short answer, yes. Part of our reasoning behind creating multiple ensembles is giving everyone an opportunity, a place to play. So it's really beautiful that we're in a time where, okay, now we're asking the question, giving everyone an opportunity to write and everyone an opportunity to create music. So that's very intentional on our part. And we don't want the commissions to just live at the level 6++ level for wind band. I think everyone has already alluded to, there's some context, it's about amplifying voices that aren't currently represented. And it's not always based on color or ethnicity. It's just sonically what is not being heard or experienced right now. So if you are in any kind of opportunity where you can expand the amount of creation, you take that. It's almost your artistic responsibility to do so.
I'm going to just tag on to Jasmine's response here. I would say also with regard to COVID, there's been kind of a renaissance, I'll say, for flexible or adaptable instrumentation. And the reason why I say renaissance is because, y'all, there have been a need for flexible instrumentation. Just because there are these larger wind ensembles that have your contrabassoon or have a contrabass clarinet, not every ensemble has that. I remember writing pieces where they may or may not have a bassoon. And especially during the times of COVID, you never knew what you're going to get. Everybody was flying on the seat of their pants. Every state, and not only every state, every school district had a different policy in which to do that. What makes me proud about talking about this is, again, we are slowly climbing out of this pandemic, but there are still these smaller ensembles, these community bands who are aching and desperately need this repertoire. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity to find those composers out there, to find those even like young composers out there that just need to get their chops ready to like learn how to write through band, through flexible instrumentation. It is a challenge, I will say that, as somebody who's been raised to be like, oh, the orchestration of like these different colors. And so I take a shot to the heart to that. However, there are other musical things you can do with texture, with regard to rhythm, and kind of a lot of creativity and instrumentation. I would highly recommend, another push for the Creative Repertoire Initiative, because we're just here to kind of encourage others and give a template for other composers and conductors and ensembles to work together and create more music for everyone. I think that's ultimately the goal here. So that's my 2 cents there.
I was going to add real quick, Jennifer, just kind of a random framing about flexible orchestration is that even, I'm thinking now through my opera lens as someone who's played at the Met for the last 15 or 16 years, that even a lot of what we consider to be the great composers of history specialized in flexible orchestration. I mean, Verdi wrote Trovatore, Rigoletto, and Traviata all in a matter of 14 months and orchestrated most of those pieces in the last 3 or 4 days before their premieres. And the orchestration was oftentimes based on what was in town. So, if he was
for real.
Right. So if he was doing the stage banda for Traviata, which premiered in Venice, it's this really random orchestration. And the reason is because those are the players they had in town at the time. So, I mean, if Verdi can do it, then I think we can too.
Although don't shrivel away from that. For just now, I was like, but Verdi's so amazing with opera and voice, and anyway, and was a political movement in his name. But I would also say that we're here to help, and it's a fun time. We can do this.
Thank you. I wanted to answer a question about ACF BandQuest expanding from the US to other countries. I mean, sure, we are always looking for partnerships, happy to have the conversation. It's not part of our plan right now, but always open to those conversations. I mean, as much music as we can get out in the world, the better. There's also a comment in the chat box about beginning music for very young students from Mary, who includes her web link there. I don't know if you have a question, but I just wanted to raise attention to that. Thank you for sharing that resource with us and the work that you're doing there. Does anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to add some questions.
I'll say, Mary, I'll get to my piece later. I'm just really swamped right now. I'm so sorry.
Many people are asking things of Jen, which is...
I understand, but we appreciate it.
I actually like writing for I would say maybe I like grade 1, anything, or even maybe earlier, because as a former pianist, I suck at rhythm or making anything complicated, and I'm too lazy to practice, which was my childhood. It's a whole long story, but it's grade 2 through grade 4. I'm no, but easy band, I can do that. I can do eighth notes and quarter notes.
And I, as a beginning band director, I've done this for 30 years, and we just need a bridge between the method book, the traditional method book, and a full-fledged 60 measure, which I know my kids freak out when they see 60 measures. That's so long. But we need a bridge. I know. We need a bridge in between there, and something that actually can really capture their attention and keep them interested. So I'm really excited about this project, and I don't know how composers feel about 0.5, because it has all sorts of very limiting ideas to it. But I feel strongly about having these kids exposed to these composers as well. I'm from South Dakota. We are very white Caucasian here, and I think it's great for our students to be exposed to other styles of music and other composers. So I just, thanks for your consideration.
Well, and thank you to you also for well, bringing this up, but also investing in that. You're thinking about the whole repertoire, just as we've been talking about today. So that's another area that deserves attention. So thank you. For the rest of you here, I mean, we had just slightly mentioned that, and Jasmine offered to talk more about it if folks had questions about fundraising and how to get more resources behind being able to take on a project like this. Wondering if that's something folks would like to hear or talk more about. That's an important aspect of this too, of course. Or no, or other questions.
I just wanted to jump in and say, you know, the fundraising piece is important because composers are friendly. And one thing that I caution is, let's say you've built that relationship. I'm always a little uneasy with the favor model of, hey, can you just pop by my rehearsal? I'll buy you a beer after the fact. And, you know, if that's offered, that's great. But I really want to be clear with, you know, these are people who have spent their money and their time on their craft as well. And, you know, they have to be able to keep the lights on like everyone else. So, you know, I think it's our responsibility as educators and conductors and ensemble leaders to try to find any way that we can support composers financially as well. And this gets me into hot water when I'm like, yeah, sometimes a beginning band piece might be more than $25. Here is the reason why. It's going to be high quality. This person's going to want to connect with you, and this person's going to be able to eat and be able to write more things for you later on that you will also enjoy. And I think it just really makes sure that our community is looking out for each other, even during the times of COVID, you know, where we're not spending money on somebody having to travel per se. I do think it is important that compensation is offered for somebody donating their time. Thank you. But I want to be very clear that the fundraising, again, it doesn't have to be singular. As a matter of fact, if we're talking about expanding voices, by expanding that fundraising base, you're basically creating a shareholder system in the art form, right? So the traditional model we've always kind of embraced as older wind band folk is you have one director who spearheads the commission and you get 10 bands to sign on, they split the pot and you go. But we live in a crowdsourced society now, so there's nothing in the rules that say, okay, the minimum buy-in is this, but once we go over the amount we need, keep going. People want to support the cause. And using the tools that are out there, you just have to be judicious about it. Like if you want to do Kickstarter, that's great, but Kickstarter has built-in rewards. You have to be able to financially support the rewards that come back. So that might not be the thing that works for your organization. Maybe a GoFundMe makes sense. Okay, great, but there's a percentage that comes out of that. So do all of your research if you're going to use any kind of fundraising software, or look into grants. Grants are still being offered during this time of COVID. Matter of fact, more in the time of COVID. Our organization has received one grant from WBDI, Women Band Directors International, to support a flex band library that is more inclusive. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, New York City is also offering arts incentives for arts organization run by women and people of color. And they're basically in a position of the arts are what keep our city alive. So anything that we can do to support artists in this city, we need to do that. And American Composers Forum even has a program currently right now, you know, specifically to support commissions and artists from Minnesota, Minneapolis specifically, and New York City specifically. So the money is out there. You just got to get your hands on it, and don't be afraid to mix and match the way that that funding comes through, because in working with these different organizations, you're also creating these partnerships that will create more art later on.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Jasmine. Yes, thank you for the plug too. ACF Create for Minnesota or the 5 boroughs in New York City. It's because of our funding is still open. So certainly welcome that. We also have a help desk for any questions, whether it's related to commissioning, publications, recordings. Please go ahead, and there's a link right there. Thanks, Laura. I also want to recognize Chris Yee, who couldn't join us today, who's going to be part of our panel this December. Excited to have him join us as another perspective in this conversation. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to all of you who joined us today and maybe watching later on. Really appreciate this conversation. Really appreciate all of you. And let's keep making great music. Thanks so much.